I'm Lillie Monroe, 62 years old, and 5 years ago when my husband died, my daughter Morgan suggested I move in with her. I sold my home and paid off 60% of her mortgage. I renovated the kitchen bathrooms and landscaped the yard. We had a good arrangement until she married Kyle 2 years ago. Last month, over dinner, Morgan said, "Mum, Kyle's parents are moving in next month, so you need to leave." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. I'd love to know where you're watching from today. If you're enjoying my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear what happened when I walked out with those keys and left them with an empty house. Robert and I were married for 40 beautiful years. We raised our only daughter Morgan in a cozy 4-bedroom colonial in a nice suburb of Boston. Robert was a high school math teacher, and I worked as a librarian at the local public library. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough to live comfortably and put Morgan through college without student loans. Robert always said that was our greatest financial achievement. When he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, everything changed overnight. He fought bravely for 18 months, but the disease was relentless. I spent those months being his caregiver, holding his hand through chemo treatments, researching clinical trials, and trying to make every moment count. When he finally passed, I was both devastated and exhausted. The house felt impossibly empty without him. Every corner held memories that both comforted and haunted me. I'd walk past his reading chair and expect to see him there with his glasses perched on the end of his nose, absorbed in a history book. The garden he'd tended so carefully seemed to wilt, without his attention mirroring my own withering spirit. The practical realities soon became clear as well. The mortgage was paid off, but property taxes, utilities, and maintenance on an aging home were more than I could comfortably manage on my librarian's pension. After about 6 months of rattling around in that big, empty house, I mentioned to Morgan that I was considering downsizing to a small condo. "Mum, that's crazy," Morgan said during one of our weekly Sunday dinners. "Why waste money on a condo when I have all this extra space? You could move in with me, have your own bedroom and bathroom, and help me with my mortgage. It makes perfect financial sense for both of us." Morgan had purchased her house 3 years earlier when she got a big promotion at her marketing firm. It was a lovely 3-bedroom craftsman with good bones, but outdated features. She'd been single at the time, and the mortgage was a stretch for her. "I don't want to intrude on your life, honey," I told her. "You're 35. You might meet someone. You need your privacy." "Mom, please," she insisted. "I work 60-hour weeks. I'm hardly ever home. The house is sitting empty most of the time anyway. And if I meet someone, well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. This is the perfect solution." After several more conversations and a lot of thought, I agreed. I sold the family home for a good price in a seller's market. After setting aside money for my future needs, I used a significant portion of the proceeds, about $300,000, to pay down Morgan's mortgage. What had been a financial stretch for her became very manageable with my contribution to the monthly payments. Morgan was thrilled. "Mum, you've lifted this huge weight off my shoulders. I've been so stressed about money and now I can actually breathe." I moved into the largest of the 2 spare bedrooms, which had its own attached bathroom. It was significantly smaller than my old master bedroom, but I was touched that Morgan insisted I take the better space. I immediately set about making it my own, repainting the walls a soft sage green, and buying a new queen bed with a beautiful quilted coverlet. But I didn't stop there. With my experience maintaining our family home, I could see that Morgan's house needed work. The kitchen had cabinets from the 1980s and appliances that were on their last legs. The main bathroom had water damage around the tub. The backyard was basically a patch of weeds. "Why don't we use some of my remaining money to fix this place up?" I suggested. "Make it really nice for both of us." Morgan was hesitant at first. "Mum, you've done enough already." But she quickly warmed to the idea when I showed her the kitchen designs I'd been sketching. We hired contractors for the major work, but I managed the project's selected materials and made sure everything was done properly. Over the next year, we transformed the house. The new kitchen had cherry cabinets, granite countertops, and stainless steel appliances. The bathroom got a complete overhaul with a walk-in shower and double vanity. I spent countless hours in the backyard, creating a garden that reminded me of the one Robert and I had cultivated together, with a small patio area where Morgan and I could enjoy morning coffee. Morgan was busy with her career, often leaving before 7 in the morning and returning after 8 at night. I established comfortable routines in our shared home. I handled most of the cooking and cleaning, not because Morgan expected it, but because I enjoyed having purpose and contributing to our household. Morgan would often express her gratitude, telling her friends how wonderful it was to come home to a clean house and a home-cooked meal. "Mum's the reason I can work these insane hours and still have a life." I overheard her telling a friend on the phone. "She's a lifesaver." For the first 3 years, our arrangement was nearly perfect. I had company and purpose. Morgan had support and financial relief, and we enjoyed a closeness we hadn't experienced since she was a teenager. We'd watch British baking shows together on the weekends, take day trips to coastal towns during the summer, and host small dinner parties for our respective friends. My library colleagues became fond of Morgan, and her work friends would often stop by, drawn by the warmth of our home, and admittedly my homemade apple pie. Then Morgan met Kyle during a company retreat in Vermont. He worked in the sales division of her firm, a department that rarely interacted with Morgan's marketing team. According to Morgan, they were seated together at dinner one evening and hit it off immediately. When she returned from the 3-day retreat, she was glowing. "Mum, I've met someone amazing," she said, echoing words I'd heard her say about various men over the years. But this time was different. Her voice had a certainty I hadn't heard before. Kyle began appearing regularly at our home within weeks. He was handsome in a conventional way, tall with dark hair and the confident smile of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. He worked for his family's real estate business part-time, in addition to his corporate job, and often spoke about properties and investments with the authority of someone who considered himself an expert. I tried to warm to him for Morgan's sake, but something about Kyle always felt off to me. He would make small comments about the house. "These kitchen cabinets are a bit old-fashioned, aren't they?" seemingly forgetting or ignoring that I'd selected them myself just 2 years earlier. He'd rearrange furniture when I wasn't around, claiming spots had better feng shui elsewhere. When I'd prepare dinner for the 3 of us, he'd sometimes suggest ordering takeout instead, making me feel my efforts weren't appreciated. Most concerning was how he spoke about his parents, Gerald and Patricia. "Mum and Dad are my best friends," he'd say, which sounded sweet until I noticed how often their opinions dictated his choices. "Dad doesn't think that restaurant is worth the money," or Mum says that colour looks terrible on most people. Morgan would nod along as if the opinions of these people she'd never met were gospel. 8 months after they started dating, Morgan and Kyle were engaged. The wedding was a lavish affair, largely planned and paid for by Kyle's parents. I was included in the basic preparations, but felt increasingly sidelined as Patricia took charge of everything from the flower arrangements to Morgan's dress selection. "Patricia knows the best vendors," Morgan explained when I offered to help address invitations. "She's handling all of that." After the wedding, our household dynamic shifted dramatically. Though Kyle maintained his own apartment, he stayed over 4 or 5 nights a week. I began feeling like a guest in spaces that had once been comfortably mine. The living room, once my evening retreat for reading, became Kyle's domain for watching sports at high volume. The kitchen, which I had designed and where I had happily prepared countless meals, now featured Kyle spreading out his work papers or criticizing my cooking techniques. My mother never adds that much garlic, he'd say, peering over my shoulder as I prepared dinner. Morgan's attitude toward me subtly changed too. She became more critical, pointing out dust I'd missed or questioning my choices in grocery shopping. Kyle doesn't eat that brand, she'd say, removing items from our shopping cart. She began declining invitations from my friends when they included both of us, saying, Kyle thinks we should spend more time with couples our age. I retreated more and more to my bedroom, creating a sanctuary where Kyle's influence couldn't reach. I added a small armchair, a bookshelf, and a compact television, essentially creating a studio apartment within my daughter's home. Morgan either didn't notice my withdrawal or chose not to acknowledge it. The dynamic was painful but manageable until Kyle's parents entered the picture more prominently. The trouble began when Kyle announced his parents were having financial difficulties. Over dinner one evening, he explained that a real estate investment had gone badly and Gerald and Patricia needed to sell their home. They're looking at apartments temporarily, Kyle said, but you know how insane the rental market is right now. Morgan nodded sympathetically while I kept my expression neutral. Something about the story felt off, especially given how Kyle had always described his parents as savvy real estate professionals. They might stay with us for a few weeks while they figure things out, Morgan added, not quite meeting my eyes. Just until they find a suitable place. The few weeks was my first warning sign. In my experience, temporary arrangements with no defined endpoint often became permanent. Patricia and Gerald came for dinner the following weekend. Patricia was a meticulously groomed woman in her early 60s with highlighted blonde hair and a penchant for cashmere sweater sets. Gerald, slightly older, had Kyle's build and the same self-assured manner. From the moment they entered, they assessed the house like potential buyers rather than guests, making comments that felt more like appraisals than compliments. "This layout has potential," Patricia said, running her hand along the kitchen counter I'd selected. "Though I've never been a fan of cherry cabinets. They show every fingerprint." Gerald examined the living room ceiling. "Is that a water stain in the corner? You should get that checked before it becomes a real problem." Throughout dinner, they peppered the conversation with questions about the neighborhood, the age of the roof, and the property taxes. It felt less like small talk and more like due diligence. "Lillie has been so helpful with the house," Morgan said at one point. "She oversaw all the renovations." "How nice," Patricia replied with a thin smile. Though in my experience, professional designers usually achieve a more cohesive look. I bit my tongue and passed the salad. For Morgan's sake, I wanted this dinner to go smoothly. After the meal, while Morgan showed Patricia the garden, I overheard Kyle and his father in the living room. "The second bedroom would work as an office for Mum," Gerald was saying, "and we could turn that back space into a proper sitting area." "What about the master?" Kyle asked. "Morgan and I could take the larger guest room." No. Your mother needs her own bathroom. Her medications and routines. You know how she is." I quietly stepped away before they noticed me, my heart pounding. They were discussing bedroom arrangements, as if my room, the one I'd paid to renovate, the one Morgan had insisted I take, was already theirs, as if I weren't even living there. Over the next month, Gerald and Patricia visited with increasing frequency. Each time they stayed longer. Each time they made themselves more at home. Patricia rearranged my carefully organized kitchen cabinets. Gerald adjusted the thermostat without asking. They began leaving personal items behind: a favorite coffee mug, a throw blanket, a pair of slippers. Morgan seemed oblivious to my discomfort. When I gently mentioned that Patricia had moved all my cookbooks to make room for her nutrition guides, Morgan brushed it off. "She's just trying to help organize things, Mum. Don't be so territorial." Territorial? In the house I'd helped buy. In the kitchen I'd paid to renovate. My best friend Judy noticed the change in me during our weekly lunch. "You look exhausted, Lillie. Are you sleeping okay?" I confided my concerns about Kyle's parents and their increasing presence in the house. I feel like they're slowly moving in without actually moving in. Judy's eyes narrowed. Have Morgan and Kyle said anything explicitly about living arrangements changing? No, but I've overheard conversations. They talk about room assignments as if I'm not even there. You need to have a direct conversation with Morgan, Judy advised, before this goes any further. I tried. I really did. I asked Morgan for coffee one Saturday morning while Kyle was at the gym. Honey, I'm a little concerned about how much time Gerald and Patricia are spending here. It feels like boundaries are getting blurred. Morgan's face immediately hardened. Their family mum. They're going through a difficult time. I understand that. But this is also my home. I contributed significantly to it. Are you keeping score? Is that what this is about? Her voice rose sharply. Because if you want to talk about who pays for what, that's not what I meant. I backpedaled, surprised by her hostility. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about living arrangements. Everything's fine, Mum. You're overreacting as usual. She stood abruptly. I need to get ready. Kyle and I are meeting his parents for lunch. As she walked away, I realized with a sinking heart that my daughter, the thoughtful, considerate woman I'd raised, had disappeared into this new identity as Kyle's wife. Her loyalties had shifted completely, and I was now an outsider in what I'd thought was our shared home. The situation took a physical toll. My blood pressure, normally stable, began rising. I developed insomnia, lying awake, listening to Kyle and Morgan's muffled conversations through the wall, wondering if they were discussing me. I lost weight as my appetite diminished, finding it difficult to enjoy meals with the undercurrent of tension. One afternoon, I returned early from a library volunteer shift to find Patricia in my bedroom examining my closet. She jumped slightly when I appeared in the doorway. "Oh, Lillie, I was just checking the closet dimensions," she said smoothly. "For storage planning." "Storage planning," I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes, well, Morgan mentioned you might be relocating soon, so I wanted to see what we'd have to work with." I felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath my feet. Relocating. This was the first I'd heard of it. That night I confronted Morgan while Kyle was working late. "Patricia was in my room today measuring my closet. She said I might be relocating soon. What's going on, Morgan?" Morgan's eyes darted away from mine. "Nothing's decided yet, Mum. We're just exploring options. Options that involve me leaving my home, without even discussing it with me first." "It's not like that," she said defensively. "Kyle's parents need help right now. They're family." "And what am I?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "Aren't I family too?" Morgan's expression softened momentarily, then hardened again. "Of course you are. But you're independent. You have options. Gerald and Patricia lost a lot in that investment. They need support." "So do I said quietly. "I thought we had an arrangement here. I thought this was my home too." "It is, Mum. Just things change. People's needs change." I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, finally accepting what I'd suspected for weeks: I was being pushed out of the home I'd helped create. The official announcement came over dinner 2 weeks later. Morgan had prepared my favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes, which should have been my first clue that bad news was coming. Kyle sat beside her, a unified front against me. "Mum," Morgan began after pouring me a generous glass of wine, "we need to talk about some changes happening soon." I set down my fork, my appetite instantly vanishing. "What changes?" "Well," she continued, glancing at Kyle for support, "as you know, Gerald and Patricia have been going through a tough time financially. They need to downsize from their house. I nodded, waiting for her to continue. They've been looking at apartments, but everything in their price range is just awful. Tiny spaces with no character, bad neighborhoods, ridiculous application requirements. Kyle jumped in. It's really been stressful for them. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. So, Morgan said, taking a deep breath, we've been talking about it, and we think the best solution is for them to move in here. I waited for more explanation, for some acknowledgement of what this would mean for me, but they just watched me expectantly. And where exactly would they stay? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Morgan shifted uncomfortably. Well, they would need your room and bathroom, since it's the largest guest space and has the attached bath. My room, I repeated. And where would I go? Kyle cleared his throat. We've been looking at some really nice senior apartments about 20 minutes from here. Very independent living activities, people your own age. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation struck me all at once, being told to leave my own home to make room for my son-in-law's parents, being directed to a senior apartment, as if I were in need of assisted living at 62. Mum, this isn't funny, Morgan said sharply. We're trying to have a serious conversation. Oh, I'm well aware of how serious this is, I replied, my laughter fading. You're telling me that your in-laws, who I've met maybe 6 times, are taking my room, the room I renovated, in the house I helped you buy. We know it's not ideal, Kyle said in a patronizing tone, but family has to stick together during hard times. I am her family, I said, pointing to Morgan. I'm her mother. I raised her alone after her father died. And we appreciate everything you've done, Morgan said quickly. But Kyle's parents really need our help right now, more than you do. The words stung like a physical slap. More than I do, I echoed. And how did you determine that exactly? Did you ask about my needs, my feelings? Mum, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We're giving you 2 weeks to find a place. That's generous. Generous. The word hung in the air between us. 2 weeks to find a new home after I sold mine to help you. After I put $300,000 into this house. Kyle's face hardened. Actually, that money went toward Morgan's mortgage. The house is in her name. Legally, you don't have any claim to it. Morgan at least had the decency to look uncomfortable at this statement, but she didn't contradict him. I see, I said quietly. So I'm just a tenant to you now, a tenant being evicted to make room for more favorable occupants. Mum, that's not fair. No. What's not fair is treating the woman who gave birth to you, who sacrificed for you your entire life, as disposable the moment someone else's needs become inconvenient. I stood up, my dinner untouched. Excuse me, I need some time alone. See, this is exactly why this arrangement isn't working, Kyle muttered as I left the room. Too much drama. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, tears streaming down my face. This room, my safe haven, my personal space in what I'd thought was my home, would soon belong to Patricia. My carefully chosen paint colors would likely be the first thing to go. I called Judy from my bathroom, speaking in hushed tones, even though it was my own private space. They want me out in 2 weeks, I told her, my voice shaking, to make room for his parents. Those ungrateful little... Judy rarely swore, but she made an exception now. Lillie, this is outrageous. You put money into that house. Kyle says it doesn't matter. The house is in Morgan's name. That's not how it works. You have rights. You paid down the mortgage. I don't even know where to start fighting this, I admitted. And even if I could, do I want to live where I'm clearly not wanted? No, Judy said after a pause. But you shouldn't walk away with nothing either. I'm calling my nephew tomorrow, he's a lawyer. And you're staying with me until you figure this out. That night I cried myself to sleep, mourning not just the loss of my home, but the daughter I thought I knew. In the morning I overheard Morgan and Kyle in the kitchen. "She'll calm down," Kyle was saying. "They always do. My mum says older women get emotional about change, but once it's done, they adjust." "I just feel terrible about how upset she was," Morgan replied. "What choice do we have? My parents need us. Your mum can get a studio apartment and be fine. She's not helpless." Their voices faded as they moved toward the front door, heading out for their usual Saturday activities. I sat on my bed, Kyle's words echoing in my mind. She's not helpless. He was right about that, at least. I wasn't helpless, and it was time I stopped acting like I was. The lawyer Judy's nephew referred me to was a no-nonsense woman named Sandra Kim, who specialized in elder law and property disputes. She reviewed my documents, bank statements showing the transfer of funds to Morgan receipts, for the renovations text messages discussing our living arrangement, and nodded confidently. "You have what's called an equitable interest in the property," she explained. "Even though your name isn't on the deed, you made substantial contributions with the understanding that you would have a place to live. That creates legal rights." "So they can't just kick me out?" I asked. "Not without compensating, you know. And certainly not with just 2 weeks' notice." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "But let me ask you this. Do you want to stay there? Fight to remain in a household where you're clearly unwelcome?" I considered the question. "No," I admitted. "But I don't want to walk away with nothing either." "Then let's work on a strategy that gets you what you deserve, while allowing you to move on with dignity." Over the next few days, I conducted a careful inventory of everything in the house that I had purchased. The refrigerator, stove, and dishwasher, the living room sofa and coffee table, the dining set that had been my housewarming gift to Morgan, the washer and dryer I'd bought when the original ones failed, the garden tools, the patio furniture, even the shower fixtures I'd splurged on. I contacted a moving company and arranged for storage. I visited banks and opened new accounts, transferring my pension and remaining savings. I called real estate agents and viewed condos, eventually finding a small but charming 2-bedroom in a quiet complex about 30 minutes away. Through it all, I maintained a calm demeanor at home. I didn't avoid Morgan and Kyle, but I didn't initiate conversations about their plans either. If they noticed my many phone calls or the time I spent on my laptop researching housing options, they didn't mention it. "Your mother seems to be coming around," I overheard Kyle telling Morgan one evening. "She's been much more reasonable the past few days." I smiled to myself. If only they knew. The perfect opportunity arrived when Morgan texted that she and Kyle would be having dinner with his parents on Friday night to finalize some details. They would be gone for at least 3 hours. As soon as their car pulled away from the curb, I called the moving company. The crew arrived within 30 minutes, and I directed them efficiently through the house. The refrigerator and stove, the living room furniture, the dining table and chairs, my bedroom set and personal belongings, the patio furniture and grill, even the curtains I'd sewn by hand for the living room windows. Within 2 hours, everything I'd paid for had been loaded onto the truck, bound for either my new condo or temporary storage. What remained was the bare structure of the house, a few pieces of furniture that had been Morgan's before I moved in, and their personal items carefully stacked in their bedroom. I left a detailed letter on the kitchen counter, the only surface remaining in the room. "Dear Morgan, I've removed the items that I purchased with my own funds. A complete inventory is attached. As you and Kyle made clear, my financial contribution to the mortgage doesn't entitle me to continued residence, but it does represent a significant investment that requires repayment. My lawyer will be contacting you about arrangements to either buy out my interest in the property or sell it and divide the proceeds appropriately. I've loved you since the moment you were born. I've sacrificed for you gladly throughout your life, but I won't allow myself to be discarded now that I'm inconvenient. You've made your choice to prioritize Kyle's family over your own. I accept that choice, painful as it is, but I won't subsidize it. Should you wish to discuss this further, please contact my lawyer, whose card is attached. Mum. I took one last look around the house I'd helped create, now stripped back to its bones, like my relationship with my daughter, and walked out with my keys still in hand. I wouldn't be needing them anymore. I checked into a hotel for the night, my few essential personal items in a suitcase beside me. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I expected to feel devastated, broken by what had happened. Instead, I felt a surprising sense of liberation. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I had acted entirely in my own interest. I had stood up for myself instead of sacrificing for others. The calls started around 8:30. Morgan first, then Kyle. I let them go to voicemail. Morgan's voice was shrill with panic. "Mom, what the hell? Where is everything? Where are you? Call me back immediately." Kyle's was angry and threatening. "Lillie, this is completely unacceptable. What you've done is illegal. We'll be pursuing legal action if you don't return everything immediately." I sent a single text to Morgan. "Please direct all communication through my lawyer." Then I turned off my phone and ordered room service, treating myself to a glass of wine and chocolate cake. Tomorrow would bring complications and confrontations, but tonight I had reclaimed my dignity, and that was worth celebrating. The fallout was both immediate and intense. My phone. When I turned it back on the next morning, was flooded with messages, not just from Morgan and Kyle, but from mutual friends who'd heard different versions of the story. Kyle had apparently told people I'd robbed their house in the middle of the night. Morgan was claiming I'd had a mental breakdown and needed help. The narratives they were constructing painted me as either criminal or crazy. Anything but what I actually was, a woman standing up for herself. I forwarded the most threatening messages to my lawyer, Sandra, who responded promptly. "This is exactly why I advise documenting everything. Their threats have no legal basis. You removed only items you purchased. Stay the course, ours, and let me handle the communication." Later that day, Sandra sent a formal letter to Morgan outlining the facts. I had contributed $300,000 toward the mortgage, with the understanding that I would have a permanent home. I had invested additional funds in renovations. I had removed only property that I had purchased myself. I was entitled to either continue living in the house or receive compensation for my investment. "Your mother is being extremely reasonable under the circumstances," the letter concluded. "She is willing to negotiate a fair settlement rather than pursuing more aggressive legal options, which could include a forced sale of the property." The letter had an immediate effect. Kyle's threats about legal action ceased. Morgan's messages shifted from angry demands to wounded appeals. "Mum, I can't believe you would do this to me. We were just trying to help Kyle's family. Why are you punishing me?" I didn't respond directly. Everything needed to go through proper legal channels now. But those messages hurt in a way Kyle's threats never could. Morgan truly believed she was the victim in this situation, that my standing up for myself constituted punishment of her. Meanwhile, I focused on establishing my new life. The condo I'd found was in a pleasant community with a mix of ages, not the senior living facility Kyle had tried to relegate me to. It had a small patio where I could garden in containers, a second bedroom I could use as a reading room, and best of all, it was mine alone. No one could tell me to leave. With Judy's help, I arranged the furniture I'd retrieved, bought a few new pieces to fill gaps, and created a space that reflected me completely. The walls were painted colors I loved. The kitchen was organized exactly how I preferred. Every item in the house was something I had chosen. In those early weeks, there were moments of profound grief. Losing my relationship with Morgan felt like a death one I mourned deeply. There were nights I sat alone with photo albums tracing her growth from a gap-toothed child to a confident young woman wondering where I'd gone wrong or if I could have done anything differently. But there were also unexpected moments of joy. I joined a book club at the local library. I volunteered at a community garden. I reconnected with old friends who had fallen by the wayside during my years of focusing primarily on Morgan. I discovered that at 62, I still had the capacity for new experiences, new friendships, new beginnings. About 3 weeks after I moved out, I heard from an unexpected source. Lisa, one of Morgan's close friends from college, reached out via email. "I hope you don't mind me contacting you," she wrote. "I've been worried about you since Morgan told me what happened. Her version didn't sound right to me. It didn't match the Lillie I've known for years. I wanted to check if you're okay." I invited Lisa for coffee, touched by her concern. When we met at a cafe halfway between our homes, she hugged me tightly. "I told Morgan she was making a terrible mistake," Lisa confided. "Several of us did. We could see Kyle isolating her, turning her against you. It's classic controlling behavior, but she wouldn't listen." "Has this been going on for a while?" I asked, realizing how much I might have missed. Lisa nodded. "Since they started dating. Kyle vets who she sees where she goes. He checks her phone. Several of us have been pushed out of her life for being negative when we expressed concerns." This new perspective was both heartbreaking and illuminating. Morgan wasn't just being selfish or thoughtless. She was potentially in an unhealthy relationship that had warped her judgment and values. "What about his parents?" I asked. "Did they really lose everything in a bad investment?" Lisa rolled her eyes. "That's the thing they didn't. Patricia was at the spa with Morgan last month, bragging about how they'd sold their big house for a fortune and were going to use the money to buy a vacation home in Florida. They just wanted to stay with Morgan and Kyle while they looked for a smaller primary residence." The revelation stung. Not only had I been pushed out, but it had been under false pretenses. The supposed financial emergency had been a complete fabrication. Over the next month, I learned more about what had happened after my departure. According to mutual friends, Kyle's parents had backed out of moving in when they saw the empty house. Patricia said she couldn't possibly live in such primitive conditions without proper appliances, Judy reported after speaking with a neighbor. They're staying in a luxury extended stay hotel instead. Meanwhile, Morgan and Kyle were struggling with the financial reality I'd left them with. The mortgage payments manageable when I had been contributing were now a stretch for them alone. They couldn't afford to immediately replace all the items I'd taken, especially the major appliances. They were reportedly eating takeout every night and doing laundry at Kyle's old apartment building. I received a formal letter from a lawyer Kyle had hired, claiming I had removed fixtures that were legally part of the house. Sandra responded with photographs, showing that the fixtures in question, the shower system ceiling fans and light fixtures, had been installed by me after I moved in and were therefore my personal property. Kyle's lawyer didn't pursue the matter further. Despite the vindication of my actions, I felt no real satisfaction in their struggles. I hadn't wanted revenge. I had simply wanted respect and fair treatment. Their difficulties were the natural consequences of their choices, not my goal. The most painful part was the silence from Morgan. Beyond those initial angry messages, she made no real attempt to understand my perspective or repair our relationship. It seemed that in her mind, I was still the villain of the story, the mother who had abandoned her when she needed help, rather than the mother who had been discarded when she became inconvenient. As weeks turned to months, I established new routines and found new joys. I started taking a watercolor class at the community center. I adopted an older cat named Jasper from the shelter where I volunteered. I began having weekly dinner gatherings with a growing circle of friends. The first major holiday alone was Thanksgiving, always a special time for Morgan and me. We had traditions going back to her childhood homemade cranberry sauce with orange zest, a specific cornbread stuffing recipe from her grandmother pumpkin and pecan pies, because we could never choose between them. Judy invited me to join her family, but I decided to host my own small dinner instead, inviting a few friends who also had no family nearby. We created new traditions on the spot, sharing stories and recipes from our various backgrounds. It wasn't the Thanksgiving I would have chosen if given all options, but it was warm and genuine. That evening, alone after my guests had left, I received a text from Morgan. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mum." Just those 3 words, no more. Not "I miss you" or "I'm sorry" or "Can we talk?" But it was the first neutral communication since everything had happened. I replied simply, "Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Morgan." A small crack in the wall between us, but it was something. 3 months after I'd moved out, my phone rang with Morgan's number. I hesitated before answering, my heart pounding. We hadn't spoken directly since the night I left. "Hello," I said cautiously. "Mum." Morgan's voice sounded small, uncertain. "Can we meet somewhere and talk? Please." We arranged to meet at a coffee shop, neutral territory for both of us. I arrived early and chose a table in the corner, giving us privacy for what would inevitably be an emotional conversation. When Morgan walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked. There were shadows under her eyes, and she'd lost weight. Her usual polished appearance was subdued hair, pulled back, simply minimal makeup, casual clothes. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "Of course I would," I replied. "You're still my daughter." An awkward silence fell between us. So much to say, and neither of us knowing where to begin. Finally, Morgan spoke. "I got your letter, the one you left that night." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "It hurt," she admitted. "But it also made me think about how we treated you, about the things Kyle said." She twisted her napkin nervously. "I'm sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry for how everything happened." The apology felt genuine, but incomplete. "What exactly are you sorry for, Morgan?" She looked taken aback by the directness of my question. For how we handled the situation, for not considering your feelings more. But do you understand why what you did was wrong? Not just how you did it, but the actual decision to displace me for Kyle's parents." Morgan shifted uncomfortably. "It's complicated. Kyle's family has certain expectations. And I don't, as your mother who helped you buy that house, that's not what I meant." She sighed. "I know we shouldn't have sprung it on you like that. We should have discussed options with you earlier, found a compromise." I studied my daughter's face, seeing both the woman she'd become and the little girl I'd raised. "Morgan, there was no compromise possible in that situation. You were asking me to leave my home to make room for people who had no claim to it. People who I've since learned weren't even in financial distress." Her eyes widened. "How did you know that? People talk. The truth has a way of coming out." Morgan looked down at her coffee. "Kyle said they needed our help. I believed him." "You believed a lot of things Kyle told you," I said gently, "including things about me that weren't true." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't know what's true anymore. Everything's falling apart, Mum." "What do you mean?" The story spilled out of her then. How Kyle had become increasingly controlling after I left. How he blamed her for not handling me better. How his parents had refused to move in, but still visited constantly, criticizing everything from the temporary appliances they'd bought to Morgan's cooking to her housekeeping. "The house is a disaster," she admitted. "We can't afford to replace everything at once. We're behind on the mortgage. Kyle's talking about selling, but the market's down." "What about your marriage?" I asked carefully. "Beyond the house issues." Morgan's shoulders slumped. "It's not good. Kyle's angry all the time. He says I've embarrassed his family. He checks my phone, my emails. He got upset when he found out I was meeting you today. My heart ached for her. Despite everything, she was still my child, and she was clearly in pain." "Morgan, that's not healthy behavior." "I know," she whispered. "Lisa and my other friends have been saying that for months. I didn't want to believe them. I thought they were jealous or didn't understand." She looked up, her eyes wet with tears. "But they were right, and so were you about so many things. Have you thought about what you want to do?" "I don't know. I love him, or I thought I did. Now I don't know what's real anymore." She wiped her eyes. "I miss you, Mum. I miss our Sunday dinners and gardening together and just having you there." The words I'd longed to hear, yet they came with such complicated feelings. "I've missed you too, every day. Could we start over somehow? Not living together again? I understand that's not possible now, but maybe rebuild our relationship." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'd like that, but it needs to be different this time. I need to know you respect me, my feelings, my boundaries. I can't be just a convenience in your life, someone to rely on when things are hard, but discard when something better comes along." "I understand," she said, squeezing my hand. "I want to make things right. And I need to know that you're safe, Morgan. What you're describing with Kyle concerns me deeply." She nodded, tears falling freely now. "I'm starting to see it more clearly. Jake showed me the text you sent the night of the wedding, the one explaining why you weren't coming. Kyle had deleted it and told me you'd just abandoned me." This new revelation stung. How much manipulation had been happening that I hadn't even been aware of? "I have a lot to figure out," Morgan continued. "About my marriage, the house, everything. But I wanted to start by trying to fix things with you." It was a beginning, a fragile one, filled with unresolved issues and difficult conversations still to come. But it was something to build on. "Would you like to see my new place sometime?" I offered. "Not today, but when you're ready." Morgan's face brightened slightly. "I'd like that very much." We talked for another hour, carefully navigating around the most painful topics, finding safer ground in updates about mutual friends and my new activities. When we parted, we hugged a brief, tentative embrace, but real nonetheless. As I drove home, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Hope that my daughter was beginning to see the truth of her situation. Concern about the controlling relationship she was describing. Caution about investing too much emotionally too quickly. And underneath it all, a mother's enduring love that had never disappeared even in the depths of betrayal. The next steps would need to be small and deliberate. A dinner here, a phone call there, rebuilding trust. One careful brick at a time. But for the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that our relationship might not be permanently lost, just transformed into something new that we would have to discover together. A week later, Morgan visited my condo. Her eyes widened as she took in my new space, the bright colors, the thoughtfully arranged furniture, the thriving plants on my small patio. "Mum, this is beautiful," she said with genuine admiration. You've created such a wonderful home. Thank you, I replied, pleasure warming me at her recognition. It turns out I'm pretty good at designing spaces for myself. As we shared tea on the patio, Morgan confided that she'd started speaking with a therapist. I need to understand how I got here, how I could have treated you the way I did, how I could have let Kyle control so much of my life. It was a promising sign, her willingness to look inward, to take responsibility rather than just blame external circumstances. Over the following months, our relationship slowly mended. We established new traditions, monthly brunches, occasional movie nights, phone calls that grew less awkward with time. Morgan began sharing more about her struggles with Kyle, how she was setting boundaries and reconsidering their future. The holidays came again, this time with Morgan joining my gathering of friends, rather than me being alone. She brought a homemade cranberry sauce with orange zest, our old family recipe, a peace offering of sorts. Shortly after the new year, Morgan called with news she and Kyle were separating. He refused couples counseling, she explained. Said I was the one with problems, not him. That was when I knew it couldn't work. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I had never wished for my daughter's pain. I'm sad, she admitted, but also relieved, like I can breathe again for the first time in years. The separation brought new challenges. Kyle fought over every asset, despite his family's supposed wealth. The house, the source of so much conflict, eventually had to be sold. Sandra helped ensure that my investment was protected in the proceedings, and Morgan received her fair share as well. Through it all, I maintained clear boundaries. I offered emotional support, but didn't rush in to solve Morgan's problems or offer financial bailouts. It was a different kind of mothering than I'd practiced before, one that respected her as an adult, while also respecting my own needs and limits. A year after the night I'd walked out with my keys, I hosted a small dinner party in my condo. Morgan was there, along with Judy Lisa and several new friends I'd made. As we laughed and shared stories over good food and wine, I looked around the table and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path that had brought me here had been painful beyond words. I'd lost my home, temporarily lost my daughter, and been forced to reimagine my future, at an age when many people are settling into comfortable routines. But what I'd gained was equally significant self-respect. New friendships, the knowledge that I could stand on my own, and a healthier relationship with Morgan built on mutual respect rather than dependency. After dinner, as we lingered over coffee, Morgan raised her cup in a spontaneous toast. To my mum, she said, her eyes meeting mine, who taught me the hardest and most important lesson of my life, that love without respect isn't really love at all. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you. Tears pricked my eyes as cups clinked around the table. The journey wasn't over. There would still be difficult moments, old hurts that resurfaced, new boundaries to establish. But we had found our way back to each other, not as we were before, but as something new and possibly stronger. As I sit here in my garden on my 63rd birthday, watching butterflies flit between the potted flowers on my patio, I'm struck by how much can change in a single year. Last spring, I was living in Morgan's house, thinking I had my future all planned out. Today, I'm in my own home with a life I've built entirely on my terms. The journey hasn't been easy. There were days when grief overwhelmed me, when the betrayal felt too heavy to bear. There were nights I questioned every decision I'd ever made as a mother, wondering where I'd gone wrong. There were moments I feared Morgan and I would never find our way back to each other. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when you find the courage to stand up for yourself. Morgan and I have established a new relationship, not the enmeshed dynamic we had before, but something healthier for both of us. We see each other regularly, but we maintain separate lives. She's renting an apartment now, rebuilding her life. post-divorce, discovering who she is outside of Kyle's influence. I'm proud of her strength and self-awareness, though I wish she hadn't had to learn those lessons through such painful experiences. As for me, I've discovered that 62 isn't too late for new beginnings. I've expanded my volunteer work at the library into a part-time position, sharing my love of books with a new generation of readers. My watercolor hobby has evolved into a small side business, selling cards and prints at local craft fairs. I've made friends who value me for exactly who I am, not what I can do for them. Most surprisingly, I've started dating again. Tom is a widower I met in my community garden group. He's kind and thoughtful with a dry sense of humor that makes me laugh. We're taking things slowly, both of us cautious after long marriages and difficult losses. But it's nice to have a companion who treats me with the respect I now know I deserve. The experience with Morgan and Kyle taught me painful but necessary lessons. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to mistreat you. I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. I learned that it's never too late to set boundaries, to demand respect, to start over. Most importantly, I learned that while we can't control how others treat us, we can control how we respond. I could have stayed in that house, relegated to a smaller room, swallowing my hurt to keep the peace. I could have walked away with nothing, allowing myself to be exploited for the sake of avoiding conflict. Instead, I chose a third path, one that honored both my love for my daughter and my respect for myself. That choice made all the difference. If you're facing a similar situation, being taken for granted by family, struggling to stand up for yourself, afraid to demand the respect you deserve, know that it's never too late to change the story. Age doesn't diminish your right to be treated with dignity. Past sacrifices don't obligate you to accept future mistreatment. You can love someone deeply while still maintaining healthy boundaries. The key is believing that you matter, that your needs, your feeling, your contributions deserve recognition, that you are not just a supporting character in someone else's life, but the protagonist of your own. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if my journey resonated with you, subscribe for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, it's never too late to write a new chapter in your story. Thank you for being part of this community, and I wish you the courage to value yourself as much as you value others.